Already, as indicated, the legal framework in Kenya is what we have in the Kenyan Constitution, which I believe we all have read, and maybe our understanding might be a bit different, but we all have read. The ministry is here. They will share the policy decisions and guidelines that have been given. But let me introduce my remarks by saying that last week I got a topic on BBC. When I arrived in China, in my room, I switched on BBC and I got to see a Kenyan young girl teaching old women how to kick. You've seen that program? Kicking, karate sort of. And so the interest was, then I see these mamas from Korogocho. And there's this lady, I think she's Pauline, or I couldn't get the name very well. She has come together to teach the old women how to protect themselves against rape. Because I think in Korogocho, rape apparently is quite rampant, and the target is the old persons. So the old women now are being taught how to kick and how you then hit the man so that you try to protect yourself. So I think when we think about old people and growing old in Kenya, I want you to wear the heart of that old person within your community, your neighbor. Nowadays we don't take our children home, so sometimes we are also not in touch with the reality in terms of how your children will react if they saw your grandmother. Because some of them have not seen older people. In my own village, once you grow old, you become a witch. I sometimes go home and I see my sister-in-laws not allowing their children to go near some older members of society. And yet these are people, when we grew up, who worked in our home, who lived in our home, and our parents did things with them. So as I talk about the little research we did as a commission, please wear the heart of thinking through your older members of society and just see whether what we are saying resonates with what your thoughts are. So the reality of growing old in Kenya is with mixed challenges. Anxiety for some of us wanting to grow old, but majority of the aged people are normally neglected by immediate family members, extended family, and community at large. So there's the aspect of being neglected. So we, having that mandate to promote gender equality and freedom from discrimination with a legal framework that is already there, we looked at sampled study of a few counties in terms of wanting to understand why, for example, the Kisses, there's tendency of burning the houses of older members of society, alleging that they are witchcrafts. They practice witchcraft, so that is that they are witches. We saw this also in Mombasa, in Kwale, where again the issue was quite rampant. So this paper will discuss the findings of that exercise and the way forward in terms of recommendation. So we find that the family remains an important institution in safeguarding social and economic security for older persons. So we designed and executed a rapid assessment against older persons in Kenya in 2014. And this was also just a follow-up from what we had done at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. The legislative framework we looked at the international level was the 1982 Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging. In 1991, the UN Principles for Older Persons were adopted by the General Assembly. 2002, we looked at the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, the MIPA. which was a product of the Second World Assembly on Aging that was held in Madrid, and 151 countries participated. So Kenyan constitution, of course, mirrors those findings that have been there, looking at economic and social rights for all citizens, especially the older members of society. Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya provides for progressive realization of socio-economic rights for each and every person. So we're thinking about adequate housing, highest attainable standards of health, reasonable standards of sanitation, social security, and clean and safe water in adequate quantities, which are critical in old age. And when Mama was talking, of course, these are some of the things she talked about. Poverty levels among the older members of society, issues of being neglected, they are not able to access good health. And I think there was a study that was done indicating that after the childbearing age, the older members of society, the women, are not taught to continue seeking health services, checkups for their reproductive health conditions, and therefore the cancers that would have been arrested tend to grow more into harm for the older members of society. So the specific rights, of course, are in Article 57 of the Constitution. And the government has, of course, made progress in terms of having the legal policy framework. The national policy on older persons and aging that was done in 2009, and then the Social Protection Policy and Social Assistance Act, among others. I'll pause here to say that the Social Protection Policy, we need to realign it with the Constitution, because there are a few things that are at variance. The Social Assistance Act, again, the government has totally refused to implement it. We took them to court, but the court didn't think we had a good case. But we had a social protection assistance law that came by through a private member's motion, Honorable Laboso, when she was a member of parliament. But the reasons the minister gives us is that the Social Assistance Act provides for processes that would be too expensive for the government. And therefore the government had a bill they proposed would become law. And the bill has never been on the floor of the House. But we have a Social Assistance Act that came in via a private member's motion. The lawyers in the House think I stand to be corrected. By all purpose and intent, that means it's a law, whether it came in through a private member or otherwise. So we then challenged the ministry responsible, and my sister is looking at me smiling. We went to court and said that the ministry had refused to implement the Social Assistance Act, but Judge Lenaola, as he then was before he went to the Supreme Court, did not think we had a good case. But it's a matter I still think needs to be looked at, because the law is in place and it requires to be implemented. This law sets up a committee, a body that is supposed to oversee the implementation. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, you're supposed to be a member of that team. So I believe now that we didn't make it, I want to encourage you to take it up and see whether we can rethink through the process of what the judge said and see whether that case can be revived again. Because in my view, we have a law. We can amend it, we can have it reviewed, but it's a law which I think the government should be able to take and implement, especially the good sections of it. It has some very good sections. I think what the ministry has contested is a little bit of what is in the law, so we should be able to implement it. So the methodology we used is we did a rapid assessment with mixed methods. We assessed 4 counties because of the limitation of the resources we had. And these ones were guided by the high level of media reports from those counties. Data was collected from older members and their caregivers using a structured questionnaire. Additional information was gathered from key opinion leaders to provide data on gaps and opportunities. The objectives of this assessment were we wanted to document the prevalence of abuse of the older members of society in Kenya, to examine the different forms of violence meted against older members, and to identify emerging drivers of violence against older persons in Kenya, and also to find out what opportunities do we have for this category. The findings indicated that there was high prevalence of violence against older persons, and this is rarely reported. And even in cases where it is reported, action is not normally taken. The key forms of violence we came across were: one, psychological harm that was manifested directly or indirectly. Others were physical harm, financial abuse, especially this we brought to the attention of the ministry. For the older people who are accessing the resources from the ministry, the challenge there is that most of them do not own mobile phones, and some of them are too old to be able to read. So the messaging and the payments have to come through phones by their relatives. We found out that most of the monies did not reach the older persons. So whoever is the caregiver, the responsible person, takes the money and uses the money instead of using it for the upkeep of the older members of society. Sexual abuse, especially for the lonely and abandoned ones. We had an old woman who had continuously been raped by young people in Kwale, and of course the family members were unwilling to get her to the police to report. And even in cases where the reports are given, the challenge is that she is the only witness. And mostly this is done in the night, and they are not able to recognize the people. They do sometimes by voice, but again, it becomes a very difficult case to prove in a court of law. So sexual abuse was very rampant. Hindrance from use of and disposal of property, in addition to pressure in connection with the will and inheritance. A lot of pressure is put on the older persons by their families, children wanting to inherit, so they do not want to take care of you because you have to die as soon as they can have you dead, so that they can be able to inherit your property. That came out very, very rampant. Those who take care of the old people would want to coerce them into signing wills, so that you disinherit other family members, because I'm the one taking care of you. I signed the will with you so that I'm able to inherit the property. So that came out so clearly. Social stigma and suspicion due to deterioration of community and family values. In the olden days, the younger people, the children, were supposed to take care of their grandparents. But in the modern society, we have our children out. A few of us who have their children in the community do not allow their children to be the caregivers for the older members in society. So we need to think about the values at the family level we are instilling in the children. Neglect and abandonment influenced by movements, rural-urban migration. Most of us are in Nairobi, we are in the cities because we have to find for our families. Most often than not, we go home maybe once in a year. For those of us who come from very far, like in Western Kenya, you can only afford to go in December. For those that are near, like my CEO looking at me, he goes to look at his farm, he doesn't go to take care of the mother. So again, we have mixed reactions in terms of how the care work. Yes, I'm saying this because he keeps saying every time he has to go home every Saturday because his home is not very far, but he will be concerned about his farm, his farm produce, the milk and the rice, and maybe even a month can go. He goes every weekend and he hasn't seen the mother. So it's quite in terms of wanting to find for ourselves that we have not put them in line in terms of what we do. Perpetrators of violence, mostly we found were number one on the list was family members, who constitute the main perpetrators, including younger wives and daughters-in-law. We found that those are the majority. A son may want to take care of the parents, the wife will not be very accommodative. A son may want the children to take care of the grandparent, the mother may be opposed to it. Other clause relatives also were in the list, and then the community came third. So family, other relatives, and then the community. Drivers of violence, we found one was land succession with regards to inheritance, because that's where we found a lot of misgivings. Poverty and related pressure for responsibilities towards care of older members. So care comes in very, very key. We also saw deteriorating family and community values due to disintegration of traditional social fabric, migration of younger people to improve their livelihood, idleness, alcoholism, and drug abuse, lack of public awareness on the rights of older persons was again one of the drivers. What are some of the recommendations we did make? That the national government through the judiciary should establish special courts or court sessions to adjudicate on legal matters affecting rights of and safety of older members of society. Because sometimes, because of the diary, and the judge will tell you it's too long, you find the matters stay in courts longer than expected. Sometimes the rulings happen after the demise of the older member who may have filed the case. County governments should invest in care programs, including establishing homes for older persons. Because we thought there were some communities where totally you are on your own, and therefore your children are not able to take care of you. And we thought that county governments have a role in this, and they can invest a little bit more in having homes for older persons. Of course, having homes also has its own challenges, and my sister there, I think, will also be sharing the module which she has taken. It has its own challenges, but we were thinking if it became the responsibility of the government, and the government then would make caregivers available for these people in a unified way. We gave a recommendation that required intensive public education on succession for property through formal wills to reduce the conflict between the youth and the elder persons. Again, here matters inheritance were quite emotive. Then again, as I began, we still are thinking the government must operationalize the Social Assistance Act of 2013 and the National Social Security Fund Act of 2013, amendment to secure the lives of older and vulnerable people. So the NSSF Act 2013, we've made some proposals on some of areas we think require amendment. Social Assistance Act, again, is there. We need it implemented fully, or if there are areas we can seek amendments, then let the ministry be able to set the stage for those amendments to be done. The Commission further recommended the speedy enactment of the Older Members of Society Bill into law. My sister from the ministry talked about it. It's still a bill, so we are hoping the 12th Parliament can be able to move it to become law. The national and county government to be compelled through legislation to establish at least one residential home in every county to take care of older members neglected and abandoned by their family members. Then the final recommendation was to work with other agencies in our coordination and advisory role in public education programs to ensure mainstreaming issues of older members of society in Kenya. So I think that is what our case was. And just the facts on the Social Assistance Act that became law. It establishes the National Social Assistance Authority. And this authority had been given huge mandates in terms of monitoring, in terms of making sure that the government was giving the services that are so required. The Act provides for that authority will have a composition of a board of management, and mostly is through institutions, which we believe it should be an easier process to undertake. The Act further provides for various forms of assistance and programs as envisaged, and the establishment of the fund, to be known as the National Social Assistance Fund, was supposed to be administered by the board. So that's what now we are seeing the ministry doing, wanting to administer the money to the older members. But we are saying the Social Assistance Act had made the same provision. So why can't it be operationalized so that the ministry remains implementing, and we have this oversight body that will have the mandate of doing the actual administration of the fund? Now, since the assent of the Social Assistance Act, I said the ministry had failed or neglected, so that we opted to move to court. And the ministry's case was that the Act is not aligned to the National Social Protection Policy, which establishes the National Social Assistance Authority, and therefore that is why they were challenging it. But clearly I've said the policy was before the new constitution, so it can be very easy for us to harmonize the two and use this as the vehicle we are going to use to reach the older members of society. And I think as a ministry, if we removed ourselves from it and allowed a neutral body to undertake the work, it may be the best way to go. So we're saying that Kenya has the legal and policy framework that requires a bit of some review and to harmonize it. And we are hoping that the court would be able to be persuaded that the law that is in place requires to be implemented, despite it having been brought by a private member. Once it's adopted, it becomes law, and it would be good if we all would respect the rule of law and put our minds together to see that we are taking care of the older members of society, because the legal and the policy framework are available, they are there. The challenges are just to align them with what as a majority we think is the best way. But again, as I said in my opening remarks, I do not want to believe that the government can come in fully and give all the needs to the older members of society. The public education, promotion, awareness that gets all of us taking our own responsibility as per the Constitution to take care of our aged within our community would go a long way in ensuring that this category are not neglected. Thank you.
Can I move on to Abdullah? Is the presentation ready for? With a bit of luck. Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. That was wonderful. Thanks so much. Morning, everyone. Again. Or is it afternoon?
No, it's still morning.
Mama Joyce, can I request you to come?
So we're now going to ask Dr. Mishra from Help Age International, who we know already from, and Mama Joyce, to give us this presentation on the role of states in providing income security to guarantee health, care and well-being for older persons. And with a bit of luck...
Are you beginning with the video?
This will, yeah, this is the beginning of the video.
We have
you're beginning
both
with
sound and vision.
Try.
Okay. Sorry, we are trying to do play a small video. Can the lights here go off, please? So
Yes.
it will be a little easier.
Get the lights off, Jenny. Thank you so much.
If you're starting with the video, we can...
So let's see whether you can hear. No.
This thing just came out.
Well, but I was hoping that it will play.
So if it...
Let's see. Maybe we'll play it on yours.
Yeah, the problem
And
is
then
with
I
the
do the...
computer. Not
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you take...
Please bear with us.
Can you wait? Can you take the wait?
It was all fine in the morning.
It's always the way.
I promise you.
It's always the way.
Let's see.
Sorry. Would you mind moving your laptop over so you can put this one here?
Right, let's see.
Thank you. So the reason the sound is not working is because I need to. Let me get the expert. One second.
Okay. I think we'll get started, and hopefully the audio will come in. I will play it for you maybe a little bit later. Let's get started. I think one of the things Commissioner mentioned about is the various policy provisions that are there all around. But I think just reflecting on that, if I go back, if I would tell in this room the word racism, many of you would get angry, isn't it? You will get angry. Racism, If I would also use the word sexism, you would also get very angry, If I would say, please don't throw things at me. But if I would say the word ageism, which basically means discriminating against somebody based on their age, the type of emotions that you would have had to those two other words, you would probably not have. This is a very learned audience. Please don't get me wrong. I'm sure some of you will, but public at large will not feel that revolted. I think in many ways the video I was trying to show you from Bishop Desmond Tutu speaks exactly to that because we are older persons, we are no less human. Our rights are there, we are human beings, and we matter. I think that's the summary of his message. He of course does it much well than me. I think in many ways, as we talk about societies, as we are talking about aging societies, I think in many ways, policies and provisions and everything can go on. But as long as people will believe an older person is a lesser human being, is less capable, these things will not happen, and we will not achieve the society that all of us, the discussion that we are having today here. So, any luck there? Yeah. Plate. Bring it to the beginning, maybe. Sorry about the. I have to find the play button. Can I?
As we get older, our bodies change. We lose some of our dexterity and physical strength, but our rights do not change. We may have fewer teeth, but we are no less human. We do not and should not become invisible. 2015 is an important year for us oldies. A pair of United Nations summits tackling the issues of our time, poverty, inequality, the environment, and climate change are platforms that we should embrace and influence. We can show the world who we are, where we fit in, what we hope to see. We'd like to tell the world that we count, that older people everywhere count, and that people of all ages should be considered when we set our sustainable development goals. This is not just a matter of concern to my generation. People are living for longer all around the world. By 2015, it is estimated that 21% of the world's population will be over 60. Today's young people will therefore form part of the largest group of older people in history. No future development goals can be considered legitimate or sustainable unless they include people of all ages, and none is forgotten and left behind. I am Desmond Tutu. I'm 83 years of age. I'm for people of all ages, and I want everyone to count. Join Action 2015 and stand with people of all ages.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think when I go into my presentation, I know for the next 2 days we'll be talking a lot about care, and I think Professor has given a very wonderful setting to it. I request your permission to deviate a little bit and focus on an issue around income security for older persons. And you know, I ask your permission. I know income security as an issue is probably not the central theme of this workshop, but I will show you, you know, through this next. Do I have what, 2 hours or something?
No.
Next.
I'm the boss. You're
But that didn't count, right? That was like.
Well.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll try to give you a quick sense of how having improved income or improved security for older persons leads to better health and care for them, and ultimately leads to their dignity and well-being that we all are aspiring to achieve. And I'm here with Mama Joyce. You heard her, and she's a co-presenter, and I will get started, and Mama will come in. I think this is a fact that will probably get repeated through the theme of this workshop again and again. Population aging is happening globally quite dramatically. You have countries like Japan, which are called hyper-aging societies, where it has already reached 30% of the older person, 30% of the total population are older. And in Africa, it will not be left behind. By the year 2050, it is. Again, looking at the population projections, Africa will have a 4-fold increase. Older persons contribute a great deal to the societies, to their households. I was very happy that somebody from Tanzania, Kwawaze, in Kwawaze is an organization in which older persons were given certain amount of cash transfer. And when we did the research, when the money went to the older person's hands, a lot of time people will think money goes to an older person's hand, that person spends it on himself or herself. No. Yes, that person spent a lot of it on himself or herself, but that money also helped in household determinants of well-being. Household dietary diversity increased, they ate well in simple terms. School enrollment of children went up, and their participation and that house's participation went. I think Kawawaje, you will be hearing more about it. So when older persons, they do that role, both for themselves and the households, and of course the economic contribution. I think Dr. Isabel at some point of time, probably through the course of the 2 days, will tell you there's a large number of older persons are still very active in the informal sector, in the farming. What we say, the shambas of Africa are largely run by older persons and running it. I want us to be very careful when we speak about contribution of older persons, that we do not forget the rights aspects as well. It is not important that there has to be a value tag on my head. Only if I am productive, only if I am contributing, only then I am useful. Because a lot of time, I think both the narratives are very important. We shouldn't forget we shouldn't have a narrative in which we say older persons are dependent, they're a drain on families' resources, they're not being all these things. But we should certainly weave that narrative. But at the same time, we should also say that as human beings, as Bishop Tutu said, and I think all of us probably subscribe to that they have a right. Irrespective of somebody is able to contribute or not, as human beings, they have a right that needs to be protected. The Constitution of Kenya provides quite strongly. There are international instruments, there are regional instruments. I think Commissioner spoke about it. And I think it's very important that we don't forget that and we don't make everything, because you have a value, therefore we are caring. I think that's a nuanced discussion we need to be having again and again. Despite the contribution of older persons, despite the population aging, older people over the decades or so have been excluded in development. MDGs, which is a bit of a history, I think in the past now, Millennium Development Goals that were there before the SDGs, completely, I would say they were age blind. You have the demographic and health surveys that looks into the health issues. Didn't look into issues of older persons beyond 49. Not older persons, they actually stopped at 49, as if life ceased to exist after the age of 49 or so. Things are beginning to change, and I'm not saying that all doom and gloom. Things are beginning to change, and we will, we know we have SDGs and all that. But the fact that MDGs, DHS, all these things, they have informed policy decisions, they have informed donors funding, they have informed discourses and programming for 20-30 decades and or more. I think it's very, very important. What we do today will have a sort of a knock-on effect as we go ahead. List of areas, I won't be able to go to all of them. I think all of us know. I think Mama Joyce mentioned, with old age, income reduces. Expenditure increases at the household level and at individual level. The way work is set up, a lot of older people are not able to contribute. The way work is set up, not many older people will be able to work from 9 to 5. The wage, I think our societies, the way work is looked at, many older people are not able to participate in that. Financial exclusion is another thing. A lot of older people are not able to. I think in Kenya as well as in many countries in the world, HelpAge, we did a report looking at financial exclusion of older persons, in which in many countries, if somebody is 60, 65, they are not even allowed to take a mortgage out. And yet life expectancy, what would be the global life expectancy, average global life expectancy now? Who can say? Not Isabella and not you, Professor, because you know all of it. What is the global life expectancy? Average? 70. Yet, if you would go out there, many people will say 40, 50, 60, something like that. So with that kind of a life expectancy changing, I think, the societies, how work is set up, how various other systems are set up haven't changed. Health challenges, older people, have health challenges and their cost associated. Because they have health challenges, there are barriers to social participation. It's both of a cause and an effect. Because they are sick, they are not able to equally well participate in social issues, and because they are not able to participate in social issues, they are isolated and there are mental situation and declining health. I think this is something that comes up, and I think a couple of other things here. One is on. I think it will come in Professor Isabella's presentation. Older people as care receivers and what it does to that family. If in my family I have an older person and I'm wanting to care, what it does to me, what it does in terms of time that I spend, what it does in terms of my social life outside there, what it does in terms of the cost I have. And I think those are some of the things that we need to appreciate. And the last, I think probably also to highlight, but not the least, is the gender and age intersection. The vulnerability, I think all of us know that, I think there is, significant gender inequality that exists in our societies. And what do you say, lifelong of inequality increasing. If somebody is an older woman, and didn't have enough education, got married early, had children, health declined, didn't have property inheritance on other things, her vulnerability is growing as she is living. And I think it is also a notable fact, and it's a statistics that women tend to live longer than men. So already you have the inequalities there, and at old age, it's just what you say, the double whammy. I am an older woman, on top of that, and I'm old, and I'm a woman. So I think those are some of the things that comes. Just a sort of list of areas. Now, going on to what I wanted to really speak about is how income security is a central determinant for well-being. And this comes from HelpAge and our networks work in various countries across the world, from Peru to Bolivia to Malawi, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, where if an older person had a certain amount of income security, how her or his well-being, health and care, and many other dignity, all those things increased. And then I will be speaking to that. And, I think as we go, I have drawn on a couple of recent examples. But before I go on, I want to request my co-presenter, Mama Joy, to speak a little bit about the Kenyan context, specifically focusing on the older person cash transfer program, how the older person cash transfer program is changing older person's lives in Kenya, as well as the wonderful declaration and the commitment that the government of Kenya has done is to have a universal pension for all older persons above 70 by next year, and some work is happening. So, Mama Joyce, please. Thank you.
As I highlighted in my introductory remarks, and based on my experience with my peers, MOFA, older people and especially older carers experience many changes with income security. With income security being the most critical one. In today's world, anyone without an income, like the older carer, is literally incapacitated in all aspects of life. In basic needs, food and balanced diet, good housing, clean water, good health and wellness, confidence, dignity, self-esteem, and even in being human. It is these reasons that government is obliged to provide income security as well as health care to older people. If both of these life needs are provided for and guaranteed, for sure, older people will live in good health, older people will live longer, older people will have adequate time to provide care, older people will be in a position to exploit their talents. Hatuja kuma mafikira bado. Older people will be able to participate in affairs of the community, and to crown it all, older people will remain being assets rather than being a burden to family and society. Thank you. I expect my boss to input on those basics from us, the older parents, the older generation and the carers. I want my boss now to instill those things as you listen to him. That's good.
I strongly disagree to be called her boss. But no, thanks, Mama Joyce. I think you can move in there. It's okay. I have drawn, I think what I'm speaking, I have drawn it from two experiences of HelpAge in Africa. The one is a program which we ran from 2015. It just got over. It was called the Better Health for Older Persons in Africa. It was a DFID-funded project. And what we tried to do in that program is, looking at both supply and demand sides of health. Quality of health, if I'm an older person, if I go to a clinic, or a public health facility, usually the waiting time is 4 to 6 hours if I'm lucky. And once I get to the front of the queue, and if I go, some of the diseases that older people go with, it can be arthritis, type 2 diabetes and all that. Usually there is no drugs, and I'm told this is an old age disease, Mize, take a Panadol and go home. And for those who don't know Panadol, it's paracetamol basically. And so the quality of care in health facilities is a big challenge. Access itself, a lot of older people in these poor countries, when we did the research, had to work on an average. On an average, they had to work between 10 to 15 kilometers to travel to get to a health facility. If I'm an older person with the corresponding things that I have, and going to a health facility itself is not there, so I would most probably go and see a quack, or traditional healers in an English way, and sometimes quacks locally. Awareness of older persons themselves in terms of what is their condition, how they could seek treatment was an area, and in quality also in terms of whether at a facility level, if I am a health worker, be a doctor, be a nurse, and whether I have the required sensitivity, whether I have the required skills, training and technical skills to provide care to an older person. Most of our countries, actually all the countries other than Zimbabwe, there is the number of geriatricians in the countries is 0. There is not a single geriatrician in these countries. I think Zimbabwe only had some, and they are on the verge of retiring. What we also did is collection of data, because data is a big issue. As I mentioned it to you in the beginning, the demographic and health surveys collected a lot of data that didn't go beyond 49 or 59, and it's not that life stops after that. So we collected a lot of data. So this is a program we drew on. We also looked into in this program, and on the right side of the screen, we looked into wherever in these countries when we are working, if there was a cash transfer program, and I will get to in a minute, if there was a cash transfer program, how that changed older persons seeking access to health and other things. So that is one example I have drawn on, and I think we'll talk more about it. The second example is, I think we should all congratulate, I think there's somebody from Tanzania, Zanzibar, the island government of Zanzibar, last year, the first universal pension in East and Central Africa for all persons above 70. And they have already reached about 30,000 older persons who are getting that pension, and they have already rolling it out. So I have also, and I really recommend all of you to, there is a link there, to take a look at it and just see how having this pension had changed the lives of the older persons who are getting it. And I hope Kenya will be the second, and probably we'll see that soon. Quick analysis of various cash transfer programs that goes on these countries, some by the government, some are, donor-funded programs, which is 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on the funding, some by UNICEF. Zanzibar is not there. But between $4 to $25, these older people were getting monthly, and there's different things, rural, urban, and just to give you a sense of the cash transfer. None of them are universal. Zanzibar should have been there. I forgot to mention that. So this is the Zanzibar. They get $9 in a month, older persons. So this is just various types of cash transfers. Now, how has this cash transfers helped older persons in terms of health? I put into three kind of areas, outcomes. The first thing is they used the money that they got from this cash transfer to pay for transport. To get, I spoke about access. They just paid that to get to a health facility wherever that is. Some places, local consultations. In Mozambique and in Tanzania also, they were able to pay to some extent for health insurance, for a lot of barriers in terms of insurance for older persons, but in some cases insurance companies were able to do that, and of course drugs. That's a key positive area. The second positive area is health-seeking behavior itself. If I am an older person, or I'm a person, if I get to a doctor and I talk to the doctor, I understand what is happening with me, I think it just makes me much more aware about how to deal with my situation. Adherence to treatment also came out quite significantly. A lot of time, if there is a chronic disease that is long term, because there is no secure income month after month, people will just take medicine 1 month, and because next month there is no money, they just don't take anything. With a cash transfer program, monthly, every month some money coming in, adherence to treatment, so that 6 months, if there's a course for 6 months, they're able to stay with that. And of course, more awareness, more information. Older persons were also able to support others in their family in terms of health care, because I am going, somebody is coming with me, and they were able to pay for them, especially for children. I think what really came out again and again, and this is not a romanticized word I'm saying, everywhere we went, in our focus group discussions, our discussions with key informants and everyone, they felt with cash transfer, I think somebody said, with cash transfer coming in, they were now able to decide for themselves. They had something, and they felt they were able to go and interact. Getting to a health facility, interacting with 5 people or something, I think it's just an experience that many of them experienced and mentioned. I think I should have said in the beginning, everybody of course says it's not adequate. $9 here, $4 here doesn't really go very far. We also know there are some outreach challenges, rural, and we also know every cash transfer program goes through a certain amount of challenges, targeting why I was chosen, why she was not chosen, and all that. But despite all these things, older person generally in our entire community, that we went to, said these are some of the positive outcomes that we have had as we are working on. Just a couple of things. I think the sustainable, I think this is looking into the positive ways of, where we are. I think I mentioned about Millennium Development Goals, and I think in a very, very provocative way, I think it was age blind. I think sustainable development goals are extremely age sensitive. There are several indicators, goals, targets that speaks to the language of people of all ages. Leaving no one behind is a ethos, is a value that is enshrined within the sustainable goals, and that is a wonderful opportunity we have. And not only, I know we are talking about the gender equality one. For example, if you look into the SDG 3 that speaks to health and care for older person, health and care for all, speaks a lot about older persons. And I think in many other SDGs there are the spirit of making sure, and I think somebody mentioned about mainstreaming. It is not that, and an older person's well-being is not health or income or this. It is a composite whole, isn't it? And I think SDGs really, has the spirit to do that. How it will happen? Making sure the intention just doesn't remain in words and lofty sentiments. I think in many ways, especially with the government officials as well as the civil society, we have a responsibility to make sure in engaging and making sure the leave no one behind, people of all ages is really included. And the second thing I wanted to say is the World Health Organization has also come up with a global strategy and action plan on aging and health. This is the first time, I think it came out 2 years back. This is the first time WHO as a whole is saying that in order to be prepared for an aging world in future, we have to be looking into health and care in many ways. And I think that's a really positive step forward. And we all know the new Director General of WHO from Ethiopia is very committed about these things, and also I think he's also a very strong champion of universal health coverage for all, including older persons. So those are wonderful opportunity we have to seize. I think I have the last slide. This is something that came out in Economist this year earlier. Everybody gets there. Death is inevitable. A bad death is not inevitable. A bad death can be prevented. We all can take steps. Thanks so much. We will discuss more.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to move directly on to Dr. Isabella Obodorin, get the stress right, from the African Population and Health Research Centre in Nairobi. And as Isabella said earlier, her work has been very much on thinking about the longer-term care for older persons, and that's the talk that she is now going to give us. Thank you. On carers, care work, and long-term care for older people in sub-Saharan Africa.
So thank you very much. As we set this up, it's really a pleasure to be here and an honor to be able to share with you some reflections on the broader policy context as it relates to issues of long-term care for older people, and to reflect on the extent to which issues of carers and care work emerge in this context and are addressed in the policy frames and the policy discourses that exist at the moment. And I think in doing so, I'm going to actually touch on many of the points that Prafula also raised in his presentation. So I will begin very briefly by sharing something in more detail about the global agenda on long-term care as it has emerged over the last 2 years or so, and the African debates on this issue that we presently have. And then I will look in some detail at the national and the regional policy frames that pertain to issues of long-term care for older people, and look at what is the scope and the emphasis in these policy frames, and more specifically, to what extent do they actually incorporate a recognition of issues of carers and care work or provisions on these issues. And I'll find that actually there is quite some omission in that area, and then I will try and reflect on the extent to which these omissions constitute a real gap that might require redress. And I'll do so by drawing on some empirical evidence that we've got at the moment, as well as a life course perspective on aging, which is a central way of looking at things when we look at issues of aging and study issues of aging. And then I'll just conclude with a few reflections on what the implications might be for next steps. And maybe I will be able to point to 1 or 2 practical steps that we can take. So, the global agenda on long-term care. As Prafula already mentioned, it's really encapsulated in the WHO Global Strategy and Action Plan on Aging and Health, which was adopted by all member states, including all African member states, in May 2016. And this global strategy has 5 strategic objectives, and the 4th objective speaks specifically to issues of long-term care, and it is to develop sustainable and equitable systems for providing long-term care, which involve care both at home, within communities, and institutions. Now, this global strategy on aging and health is very much grounded in the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is about health and well-being for all at all ages, and SDG 5, which of course is central to our discussions here. And it's also explicitly grounded in a number of rights treaties, in particular treaties that speak to the rights of women. And together, this global strategy distills what could be described as the ultimate goals of what long-term care systems really should be achieving. The first is the provision of quality long-term care. That is long-term care that is person-centered, that protects the dignity and the autonomy of the care recipient, and that actually optimizes the capacity of the person. The second is that long-term care should be integrated and coordinated with health service provision, so that you have a continuum of care from health to the more social aspects of assistance that an older person requires. The third, very importantly, is that there should be equity of access to quality and integrated care for all older persons who need it, not just the rich or not just those who reside in urban areas, for example. And the fourth, which perhaps is most important for us here, is that there should be fair and decent work conditions and opportunities for all of those who provide care, be it within family settings or within more formal settings. And then finally, that long-term care services and systems should be sustainable, in particular in terms of financing and the workforce. So this is the global agenda for long-term care that really is very prominent now at this point. So let's look at what is the African debate on issues of long-term care that we have at the moment. Well, I think the first thing to note is that in spite of the fact that African governments have committed to this global agenda, there is a dearth of focused and constructive policy debate on the issue. And I've tried to reflect on what the barriers might be to this absence of a constructive debate, and I've come up with 3 possible barriers. The first is, of course, as we all know, that in Africa we have the overriding population and development agenda is youth-focused. It's Africa's youth that needs investment in and that needs to be nurtured. And as a result, issues of aging are of relatively low priority. However, as we've heard from Prafulla and from Juliet and others, there is a debate on aging broadly, and that debate is intensifying, and it's focusing mainly on issues of rights, and as far as programs are concerned, specifically on issues of social protection, and Prafulla has spoken to this. So that can't really be the only reason. The second reason why there isn't much of a debate on long-term care is perhaps a sense that, well, there isn't much of a problem with long-term care at the moment. Older people are taken care of in their families. That's how we do things in Africa. It's not really much of an issue. And there's nothing to fix there. So not much debate needed. And the third, and I think also very important factor that has militated against constructive debate on this issue is a sense of tension and resistance that arises from cultural scripts that we have here in Africa. Cultural scripts that are often also politicized, and that say that family care and family values and family bonds are part of our unique culture, of our unique cultural identity that set us apart from the global north, from the West, where older people are thrown into old people's homes and abandoned. And related to this cultural script is a sense that Western conceived ideas of formal care services, which are often seen as synonymous with institutions, are not what we want in Africa. They're not cultural, they're not, they don't concur with our culture, and they shouldn't really be considered. And I will give you just 2 excerpts from some slightly political discussions which capture these. So this is an excerpt from a Ghanaian Catholic bishop talking about care for older people and the prospect of services to provide long-term care for older people. And he says, "We must desist from creating such dead ends into Ghanaian life. For me, the day we adopt such a culturally humiliating system will be a gloomy one indeed. Let us continue to keep the aged in their homes with their children and grandchildren." And the second one is actually here from Kenya. Juliet, you will probably know this. This is from a parliament debate or a Senate debate. And this was a member who said, "We need to delete the idea of establishing small-scale residential homes for older people. That is un-African and it goes against our culture. The idea of homes has worked in the developed world and European countries and even in the USA, but I do not think we have reached that stage as a country." So clearly, a thing to note here is that when they talk about care services, the sense is that that must mean institutions, and this is rejected. And I think it's this rejection of any thought of formal care service that militates is another reason why we're not having a constructive debate on long-term care. What is also to be noted is that in the debate and in the discourses we have at the moment, there is no consideration at all, no conception even, of the issue of carers and the care work they do. Nothing. It's quite stark. So when we have a look at the policy frames that exist at the moment, both at the regional and the national level, to what extent do they consider issues of carers or care work? Well, these are the kinds of policy frameworks that exist at the moment. So at the regional level, that's the African Union. We have a policy framework, the policy framework on Plan of Action on Aging. and we have several rights frameworks, the most prominent of which is the African Union Protocol on the Rights of Older Persons. And then at country level, there are a growing number of countries that have national policies on older persons or aging. Kenya is one of those. And a growing number, but still small, of countries that have national legislation that's dedicated to older persons. Kenya is working towards one, Zimbabwe has one, South Africa has one, and some countries such as Kenya, of course, also include issues of older people and their rights in their constitutions, as Juliet mentioned this morning. So if one looks at these policy frameworks, what emerges very strongly is that the emphasis in the provisions that are included in those on long-term care centers on the question of who ought to provide long-term care for older people. And the provisions are about, should it be the family, as is traditionally the norm, or should it be formal bodies? And all of those frameworks, without exception, highlight the need to emphasize and to buttress the prime role of the family in providing care for older people in line with traditional values. And many of them call for strategies to strengthen the role of the family in this regard. As regards the role of formal care services, there are two kinds of responses that one finds. The first is a very clear rejection or active discouragement. We don't want formal care services. That's not appropriate for our context. And then there are other frameworks, including Kenya's national policy, which allow for a residual function of formal care services for those who have no recourse to family. And the rationale there is that family support systems are weakening and that therefore there will be older people who have no family member to care for them. And for those, formal care services are appropriate and required. So, looking in more detail at these policy frames and frameworks, what becomes clear is that none of them really capture the ultimate goals for long-term care systems that the global agenda specifies and that I outlined at the moment. And that means, and that includes that none of them include any provisions at all on the situation or the well-being or the conditions of carers, either in family settings or in formal settings. Nothing. It's really quite remarkable. So is this omission a gap? Is it something that one needs to address? There is empirical evidence, and then there is the life course perspective, which might offer some answers to that question. So if we look at the empirical evidence on realities of long-term care for older people that's currently available, it's very clear that much is amiss with the situation of those who provide care. And in particular, the evidence points to a number of challenges. So as we've already mentioned several times this morning, the carers are overwhelmingly women, either spouses or daughters-in-law or other kin or domestic helpers. But what's clear is that the reality of caregiving for an older person is often associated with negative impacts on those providing care. Caregiver burden and stress, real opportunity costs in terms of the time available or the capacity available to engage in work or in training or in schooling, impacts, negative impacts on the physical health and the mental well-being of caregivers, as well as high financial costs. And what also emerges is that there might be inequities in these negative impacts, in that they are much more pronounced among older carers, among poorer carers, and among those who are caring for older people with dementia. And then lastly, the evidence also suggests quite clearly that there is a real emerging demand, for formal long-term care services and a need for formal long-term care services. Here in Kenya, we know that there is an organic expansion of private sector care services. Of course, only affordable by those who have the money to pay for it. But it shows that there is a demand for services to support those who are providing care within families. So that's the empirical side of it, which shows that really there are issues for those who are providing care. And then maybe these challenges are underscored if we think about the life course perspective, and in particular the two key tenets or principles that are central to it. The first is that experiences and conditions in earlier life have long-term consequences that shape later life. What happens to you in your youth, in your early adulthood, will have repercussions as you grow older. And the second tenet, which is equally important, I think, is that the lives of young and old generations are linked and interdependent. And these connections are powerful forces which shape both our personal biographies, but also shape macro phenomena and macro changes. The connections between old and young are really powerful drivers of our own lives and what happens in society broadly. And so, drawing on these, one could say that we need to consider, when we think about the challenges for carers that the empirical evidence points to, we need to consider that these probably will lead to longer-term deficits in terms of economic opportunities or economic well-being, longer-term deficits in terms of health, for a rising number, in particular, of young women into later life today. And we need to consider that the challenges that these carers face also mean unfavorable impacts for the people they are caring for. We've talked about abuse. We've talked about tension between those who are providing care and those who are receiving care. Unfavorable impacts for their own children and youth that they are supposed to bring up. And then unfavorable impacts perhaps for broader economic and social development. I've put here in brackets, for example, the demographic dividend. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept of a demographic dividend, which is an idea that as Africa invests in its youth, it might be able to reap a dividend of enhanced economic growth. It's quite a complex construct, but that's sort of the essential idea. But issues of care and issues of carers might have an impact also on the extent to which a demographic dividend of that nature might be reaped. So these are just reflections, and I hope that they could provide some stimuli for further discussion. And I will conclude with some reflections on what could one do. So what are the first few steps that perhaps one might think of pursuing? So I think the first thing to realize is that the current omission of issues of carers and care work in the policy frames that we've got is a real gap, and that needs to be addressed. And what steps might one take towards that? Well, perhaps a first step is to begin to foster some more constructive debate on long-term care for older adults and issues of carers, and dispel some of the misconceptions that abound about it. Perhaps this is a start for such kind of dialogue, but perhaps there is need for a more national level dialogue in different countries, and importantly a dialogue that builds on evidence that we've got at the moment and that needs to be marshalled, but also further attempts to generate relevant evidence on the realities of long-term care at the moment in different contexts in Africa. And then building on that, maybe some move towards actively consolidating the policy architecture that we've got, revising the frames that we've got, reviewing them, amending them to ensure that they are fit for purpose. And a starting point, perhaps, in doing that is the Common Africa position on long-term care systems for Africa, which the African Union adopted just in July this year, and which sets out a number of steps that the African Union Commission, that member states, but that also international development partners can take now to move towards a situation where African countries can begin to develop long-term care systems that are appropriate for them and that are feasible and equitable and sustainable. And those of you who have engaged know that the content of this came from a first policy, research, practice dialogue on long-term care for the Africa region that we convened here in Nairobi last December. And it's the perspectives and the insights that were generated in that dialogue that are now in this Common Africa position. And it provides a very good platform for further research, for advocacy, and for policy work. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to our three speakers, who I think provide us a fantastic framework to understand and also to think about some of the challenges that we face. I think, just to say, for me, what comes out of this is, just to put it very boldly, we have to think about the role of the family realistically in all our societies. We all think that, and love to think, I hope and pray that my sons will not let me, die on my own when I'm old and vulnerable, but can I really expect them and their wives to do that? Do I have to take more responsibility for thinking about my old age? Do I expect my government to help me think about that? Are those, and all our situations are different, but we have to be realistic. And we also have to be realistic, as all the speakers says, about the cost to the people that do the caring. We love our older people, we hope. We might not, but we hope we do. But how much can we do? We're not specialists as a daughter-in-law in looking after somebody with a very complicated illness like dementia. Can we expect her to give up her life? Can we expect her husband, my son, to do that, to pay? How do we do this? The SDGs, the Social Development Goal, we talk in this highfalutin way, but it says, how do we recognise the costs? How do we reduce the costs where they're unfairly distributed to that daughter-in-law, to that son, to that grandchild? And how do we redistribute it? How do we do a fair distribution of the responsibilities? What would help us do that? And what is appropriate in each country? Is it more, care within our own homes provided through, as Isabella and the others have said, help that is paid for, that we can afford to pay for through cash transfers and so on? How do we do that? But I think these are the questions that have come out of all the three speakers, at the same time as recognising the dignity and rights of the people that we're caring for. They're not just, oh dear, they're problematic people in their old age. How do they have rights so they have a say in what care we want? So we're not having to beg from a son or a daughter-in-law to provide us with a little bit of this or a little bit of that. So how do we do that? But there are real conflicts there about the rights of the different people, and me as a lawyer are particularly interested in that. And I think, just finally, before we move to the questions and move on, I think the issue that was raised by Commissioner Lechuma about when there are conflicts and there are violence, how does the legal system respond? How does it respond? How do we ensure there's enough difficulty in all our countries about recognition of violence against women? Is there more difficulty when the violence is against an older woman or an older man, indeed? Do we need special places? Can the community dispute resolutions, the chiefs, the local areas, deal with those disputes and, are there a way? Or do we need other arrangements? Do we have to go to the court, to the police, to the criminal justice system? How do we put those rights into practice in terms of protecting the elderly from difficulty? So for me, where you go to resolve your dispute is really important, as well as recognising you need to recognise there's a problem in the first place, because those things are, and where you go and whether there's access to it, like access to your health service, access to your local dispute resolution system, is equally important. So with those remarks, are there any questions or things that anybody wants to say to the speaker before we move on to the presentations from the next three, the next brief introduction by the next four speakers, and then we can all talk together. Are there any particular questions now that anybody wants to ask each of the speakers, any of the speakers, or shall we move on? Hello.
We're short on time, so we need to...
Yeah, very quickly then, please. I saw two hands go up. Quickly, yes.
Yes,
Thank
this
you,
is... I need a mic.
You need a
I'm
mic.
loud enough.
Shout.
I think I'm loud enough.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a time, there was a clamor for establishment of small claims courts within our community. And these small claim courts could have come in handy to address some issues instead of resorting to going to courts to resolve issues concerning our elderly people. I don't know whether that initiative is still there or not. The other thing is that with the establishment of what we call Nyumba Kumi, these are, people who are given responsibilities to take care of issues in every 10 houses. In our area, we are using the Nyumba Kumi very, 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 very much, even to look at the welfare of the older people within that small community. And we make sure that every old people has somebody who is taking care of him or her. The other issue, and the last one, is that in Nyeri, in our county, we are really putting the newly elected governor to task to start providing national hospital insurance cards to all the people who are above the age of 70. I am happy that the governor has responded positively, and we are really pushing it we are really pushing him for it. And we have told him to start on a small scale. By the end of 5 years of his term, he will have covered so many old people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Maureen, would you like to say something quickly, and then we'll move on? Thank you.
Mimi nitaongea kwa Kiswahili na maswali karibu yote nitaelekeza kwa madam, sijui tulimuita Profesa Dijuma. Swali la kwanza ni kwamba tunaongea juu ya old age na pia tunaongea juu ya youths, lakini hatuongei juu ya middle age ambao pia ndio labda kesho watakuwa old people, wale watahitaji kuwa taken care of. You find that somebody is poor, haizi peleka mtoto shule, he has nothing to inherit, so anaweza kosa kulindwa in the future just because ile familia alileta juu haina chochote. What are you doing because of that, so that in the future our old age wawe na mtu wa kuweza kuwatunza pale in the family, baadaye kila siku tuwe tunasema government. What are you doing? Because he's not able to take children in school, so at the end of the day kesho his sons will be also poor, his children will be poor. Who will be taking care of them? So why are you not talking about the middle age people, so that in future they are the only people that will need to be taken care of? Please, what are you doing about that? Also at the same time, wakati tunaongea mostly tunakuta when we talk about women to women's marriage, most of them are poor. They have children to take care of, to take to school and all that. What are you doing maybe about the widows and all those, so that they have something at least to take care of those children who are supposed to be parents tomorrow? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I think I'm going to have to say, so we have time to discuss afterwards. Let's move on. Then I know we're all itching to talk, and that's great. Thank you very much. But if we have time to talk in the moment or two, when we've heard our next 4 speakers, now they're very distinguished speakers, but we're restricting them to 10 minutes to inform the discussion so that then we can all have the discussion amongst ourselves. So if we could just have those very interesting further perspectives, having had the 3 overviews, then we can move into groups and we can have some discussion amongst ourselves. So I'm going to ask Jenny, once we've had the next speakers quickly, to then say which groups we've sort of suggested you might go into. So she'll do that at the end of the 4 extra pieces of information and discussion help that we're now going to have. If that's okay with us all, is that all right as a structure for going forward? Yes is the answer to that question, right? Good, without letting you say it. So may I ask Juliet Kohler to give us the ministry position. She's going to talk about an overview of the social protection system that we've heard, social protection, an overview of Kenyan policy. So from the ministry perspective, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're restricting you, if I may, to 10 minutes. I know. Yes, of course. Yes. I think this one, yeah, it's not in there, is it?
Okay, I'll try and summarize my presentation so that I fit within the 10 minutes that I've been given. Because some of the issues that in my presentation have been addressed by the previous speakers. So I'll not go into the issue of the population of older persons in Kenya, but as the previous speakers indicated, the population of older persons in Kenya has increased significantly over time. If we look at our last census, we'll see that the population of older persons was 1.9 million. And the projections indicate that by the year 2030, we'll have 3 million older persons in Kenya. And by 2050, we'll have 8 million older persons. And this demographic shift has resulted in a change in the way we live as a society. We found that there's rapid urbanization. We also find that there are shifting attitudes within communities and population movements. This has resulted in we as a society losing some of the inbuilt traditional social systems that we had to take care of our older persons. And it is important to note that gender is also significant, is a significant dynamic when it comes to aging. Older women face greater risk of physical and psychological abuse due to discriminatory societal attitudes and the non-realization of the human rights of women. Some of the harmful traditional and customary practices result in abuse and violence directed at older women. We also find that contributions that older persons continue to make towards development and sustenance of their nations are hardly noticed. Their contribution as caregivers in the face of such deadly pandemics as HIV and AIDS, caring for infected and affected members of the family and orphans is hardly appreciated. Policymakers have had challenges in addressing some of these issues because of lack of data, and some of the milestones that we have made as Kenyans, especially when it comes to ensuring that we have the right policies in place to address policies and legal frameworks in place to address the rights of older persons include the Constitution. And in the Constitution of Kenya, we find that in Article 10, which is the national values and principles of governance, it stated that human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, and non-discrimination and protection of the marginalized that include older members of society. We also have Article 21, which deals with obligations to government through state organs and public officers. And here, public officers have a duty to address the needs of vulnerable groups within society, and this includes women, older members of society, and persons with disabilities, children, youth, etc. The principles under Article 27, principles of equality and non-discrimination, states that the state shall not discriminate directly or indirectly against any person or on any ground, including race, sex, pregnancy, matrimonial status, health status, ethnic and social origin, color, age, disability, religion, etc. And then we have Article 43, which gives the government an obligation to provide for the needy. Article 57, which is exclusive for older persons, states that the state will take measures to ensure the rights of older persons to fully participate in the affairs of society, to pursue their personal development, to live in dignity and respect, and to be free from abuse, to receive reasonable care and assistance from their family and the state. We also have other laws in Kenya that address the rights of older persons. And here we have the National Social Security Fund Act, we have the National Health Insurance Fund Act, we have the Pensions Act, the Widows and Orphans Act, the Provident Fund Act, and the Social Assistance Act of 2013. And then we have the National Policy on Older Persons and Aging. And this policy outlines the government's commitment to address the well-being of elderly persons by creating an environment in which older persons are recognized, respected, and empowered to actively participate in society and development. This policy was developed in 2009 and is in the process of being reviewed so that it's aligned to the Constitution. And then we have the National Social Protection Policy. This policy was passed in 2011, and the policy seeks to ensure that all people have the requisite financial cushion to enable them maintain a decent living standard, including access to health care during and after their active, productive ages. Income security provided through household and child benefits that facilitate access to nutrition, education, and health care. Income security through assistance for older persons, people with disabilities, and those in active age groups who are unable to earn sufficient incomes in the labor market. And our development blueprint, which is the Vision 2030, also looks at, has a flagship project that addresses issues of social protection under the social pillar. And the main flagship project under this pillar is the establishment of a consolidated social protection fund, which is critical to the financing and sustainability of social protection in the country. As a country, I think from the previous speakers talked about the international instruments that we are party to, and we have the Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging and Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, and the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been a very significant way recognized and mainstreamed older persons and aging issues centrally, as mentioned by previous speakers. And as government, we have, or even as the Ministry of East African Community, Labour and Social Protection, we've embarked in mobilizing the participation of other ministries and state departments to coordinate the national and coordination at national and county level, have dialogues for the purpose of internalizing and localizing and also mainstreaming issues of older persons as we implement the social sustainable development goals. As government, we are also implementing the older persons cash transfer as part of social protection for our older persons and orphans and vulnerable children. And and populations living in arid and semi-arid areas. This is under the National Safety Net Program. And under the Ministry of East African Community, Labour and Social Protection, we have 3 cash transfer programs. This is the Older Persons Cash Transfer Program, the Orphans and Vulnerable Children Cash Transfer Program, and the Cash Transfer Program for persons with severe disabilities. And this is in response to Article 43 of the Constitution. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it's also a flagship project under the Vision 2030. And in addition to the existing cash transfer program, in June 2017, the government decided to enhance and expand the existing older persons cash transfer program into a universal social pension program that provides transfers to all older persons aged 70 years and above. This has resulted in the number of older persons benefiting from cash transfer programs increasing from 295,000 to 835,000 older persons. And through implementation of the cash transfer programs, we've been able to realize the following. We've realized that there's enhanced household purchasing power. There's a rise in savings and investments among the beneficiary households as a result of the safety nets, and there's more ownership of assets. Reduction in poverty levels among the beneficiary households. Increased capacity for households to make better investments for their future in education, child nutrition, and production. Improved retention and transition of children in schools. Improved nutrition status of children due to dietary diversity. Improved child health with reduced frequency of illness of children and other family members. A vibrant local economy during payment days. Reduction in child labor among the benefiting households. And an improvement in the management of cash transfer programs in collaboration with other stakeholders, and also the fact that we have a single registry where all information about social protection interventions in the country can be accessed. And through the National Hospital Insurance Fund, we've also been able to provide a health cover for all beneficiaries of our cash transfer interventions. Really summarized, I think I've talked about the single registry. I think in conclusion, we can note that as a country, we've made reasonable strides in advancing the rights of older persons, but we also appreciate that there's still room to do more. And as our population of older persons increases, we need to put in place more measures to ensure that the rights of older persons are addressed, and that when it comes to providing them with care, we as a society are in a position to provide care for our older persons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Commissioner Warui, is that how you say your name? Oh, I apologise if I get it wrong, from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. She's going to give us a quick introduction or a consolidation of understanding the legal framework for the protection of older persons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It is Warohio.
Sorry.
Jetita. Listening to Madam Juliet and also previously Commissioner Chair Winnie, they've actually been reading part of what I was supposed to say. So what I'll try and do is not repeat what they said, but add into the rights discourse on the whole issue of aging. I am delighted and happy this afternoon to be here to speak, because this is really a personal issue also to me. I'm also aging. At least that is one thing that I'm certain about. I don't know how it will be. So I think for me, this also helps me personally to begin preparing for that. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is a constitutional commission, and it has the mandate of developing a culture of human rights, and therefore the dialogue this morning is very instrumental in terms of how we are able, even also as a commission, to respond to those issues. And some of the things that we do, for those who may not be aware, is that we receive complaints, we investigate, we redress, we advise, we audit both public and private institutions. We also monitor the state compliance in terms of our national, regional, and international obligations. We also advocate for policy, legislative change that has a human rights dimension. Really, the whole issue of when you talk about older persons, or in Kenya, members of the older community, there are three questions that are very critical. One, what is the state responsibility? And we've begun speaking to that. Two, what facilities has the state begun putting in place, and how are they working? And that is what Madam Juliet was speaking to. And three, the obvious questions that we face even at a personal level: what are the continuing challenges that are there that face people who are growing old? At the National Commission, beyond what Commissioner Winnie said, we do receive complaints from members of the older community, and since 2005 to date, we have received 594 complaints, which means every month we receive about 4 complaints that relate with issues of older persons. And one critical issue that comes, which is of a high percentage, is one, the whole issue of access to justice. So that is very critical, which is 13% of the complaints. 2, issues of social security. And 3, the whole issue of dignity, which is 4%, because for us, dignity is a very critical issue. And security, which is 3%. And another one that continues to play is the whole issue of property, which is about 2%. So it tells you that there are serious issues that impact persons with, that impact the older members of the older population. When you think about statistics, they've been stated. It therefore means that this is an issue that is not going to go away at any time soon. Actually, it's going to become the issue that we need to deal with at some point. From a rights perspective, where do we start? The Constitution has been mentioned, and we think about it when you just go to Article 1. It talks about the sovereignty of the people. And who are the people if they are not members or they are not the older persons? So we need to think about that sovereignty, so that older persons are really the ones who are driving the agenda. Article 3 is very important, and this is for me the article that I love best in the Constitution. That is Article 3.1, which is an obligation that we gave to ourselves, that we all must respect, we all must uphold, we all must defend the Constitution. So what does that mean? That for us to be able to respect, to uphold, and to defend, which I usually say we must be rude to the Constitution, then we must understand what the Constitution means for those of us who are in Kenya. That way then you'll be able to defend, you'll be able to respect, and you'll be able to uphold the Constitution. When you think about older persons, really they are a special people in this republic and have their own special protection. But it means that from where we sit as the National Commission, Chapter 4 of the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights, it means they have all the rights that you and I have. All the rights that you and I have. So if there is nothing, they are special because of their special circumstances, but we have that singular obligation. And one of the things that it says in Article 19 and Article 20 is that the Bill of Rights is integral. It is not maybe, it's not sometimes, it is essential. It's such an essential aspect in all our policy development when it comes to issues of social, when it comes to issues of economics. And that is what we are dealing with today. And it's part of our democracy. So it's not an option that we have. And all of us are bound by the Bill of Rights. All of us are bound by the laws, whether we are public or state officers, or whether we are ordinary citizens, even if you're a visitor in this country. Why is this very important for us to look at it from a rights perspective? Because what the rights perspective tells us is that we now need to look at everything from a human rights-based approach. A human rights-based approach. What does that mean? It means you need to take the Panther approach. The Panther approach means there must be participation. There must be accountability. There must be non-discrimination. There must be transparency. There must be equality, and we all must respond to the rule of law. That is what the Panther means, the acronyms of the word Panther. So if you forget anything else I say, please do not forget the Panther. Let's ensure we participate, all the members must participate, and we must do everything in a participatory manner, accountability, non-discrimination, transparency, equality, and the rule of law. You've heard from Madam Juliet the avalanche of legislation we have. Actually, as a country, we have an avalanche of legislation in terms of laws and policies. This is the one sector where law follows policy. Usually we have laws and then we're starting about the policy. The right way should be policy and then laws. So we have enough policies and laws to go by. And all this started as way back in 2000. And if you just look in years of 2000 to 2005, we had developed two that we had two policy directions that link to this issue. One on the universal free primary education in 2003, and the Pensions Act, which was mentioned. When you look at the period between 2006 and 2010, we had three. And some acts that have not been mentioned is the Sexual Offences Act. It actually recognizes issues of age when it comes to issues of how the cases are managed. That speaks to a lot. I think when you think about this whole issue from a rights perspective, the minimum right that you can accord you and I one is the right to life. So how then do you sustain the right to life? And for me, closely followed to that is an article that I love so dearly after Article 3.1 is Article 28. Your dignity, that it must be respected and it must be protected. I think if we ask Mama Joyce or any one of us, the thing that hurts us most is not missing the food. It's you intruding on my dignity. Because that is what makes me me. That is what in Africa we call Utu. So those two, that issue of dignity is key. I think for me it is the underlying issue in this whole discussion. And once we learn as a country, as a continent, as the globe, to respect each and everyone's dignity, then we would get all the other rights in their perspectives in the right order. When you go to the period between 2011, 2015, you find we increased. This is after the significant constitutional change. We had 10 various policies and legislations touching on this. I want to mention the ones that have not been mentioned. One, in 2011, we had the unclaimed financial assets. Have we ever thought how we can use that facility to dignify those old people who are suffering because the assets have not been claimed? The Elections Act, and we're just emerging and going through yet another election. The whole special facilities we have for older persons. The others have all been mentioned. The mental health policy, 2015-2030. And the last one that usually will never be mentioned in this kind of sitting, Persons Deprived of Liberty Act, 2014. They are inmates who are elderly and they're in incarceration. Between 2016 to date, we have developed two, which for me I think are significant as we have this discussion. One is the Prevention of Torture Act, 2016, and the Legal Aid Act, 2016, which provide free legal services for persons who are vulnerable. And this category of people fall into that. So when you look at the administrative actions that have come, a lot has been done, as Juliet has said. And to really see how important this is from a rights perspective, when you think about the right to education, you remember in 2004, remember Kimani Maruge? Remember the old man?
Yeah.
Kimani Maruge, who joined primary school in Wasungishu County in Eldoret. And he's the only, you know, if you don't know, he's a world record holder, and he's the only one, the oldest man to go to primary school. And he even inspired a movie. Which one? The First Grader. Huh? So it's significant in terms of people realizing and enjoying their rights. The cash transfer has been spoken about. One other thing that happened in 2008 was the free secondary education for day. It's also an educational issue. And there, you may not know this man in 2016. He's called Kazungu Humadi Kadenge. He joined Standard 3 from those who come from Kilifi County. He passed his exam. He got 134 points and enrolled in secondary school this year at the age of 74, just like Maruge. So it tells you all these rights are not for kids, they are also for older persons. One of the things that Juliet has not mentioned, and I bet it's because of time, is that there's now a program that under the Ministry of Labor that is looking at building homes, shelter and rescue homes for the older members. And the first pilot is in Kirinyaga County, and the other one is going to be in Kilifi County next year. So it tells you the resistance that Professor was speaking about, we are moving towards that gradually. And to cap it all, the cash transfer, the amount of money, it's now in billions, and it's increasing. And next year, I think it will be attuned for 7.3 billion. So it tells you that it's an important economic venture. I want to conclude with a few things. First of all, for me, not only is it a personal issue, but I also have parents who are aging. Actually, they are above 70, and I really encourage them to participate in terms of registration, because it's important, first of all, why we need the data to know how many old people we have. Whether or not then they get the amount of money is another thing. I also have my two grandmothers who are above 90, and they are in the care of caregivers 24/7. So it is also a personal experience. And all of us, if you think about it, they are there. This morning as we were speaking, I thought about one of the caregivers, and I thought, we are actually violating her rights, you know. We had, the whole family has taken it as, the usual, it's a care thing, it's not a rights thing. And we have many of those. So for me, what are some of the things that we need to do to ensure that we continue the dialogue of the rights discourse? One, let us not have this discussion only as older members. Let's not have these special workshops. Let's integrate this issue in all the discussions that are there in all the workshops, so that it can become a main issue, not a side issue. Two, we must have the Social Protection Act operationalized. Actually, one of the things just reading that act is that you find that it's not really talking about older persons only. It's talking about widows, it's talking about widowers, it's talking about children who are vulnerable. It is even talking about youth who are unemployed. So if we sold the social protection to the people of Kenya, all of us would have has a stake in it. The question that we are not ready for it is neither here nor there, because the Constitution is supreme. And I think as the Constitution provides, then the state has to show how or why not. It is not on from our end. The other thing about the cash transfer, we have done very well as a country, but we really need to look at the rights around the cash transfer issue. One, how are the modes of payment? Are we dignifying the older persons as we pay them? What rights are being violated around there? Who is actually benefiting? because there are situations where the beneficiaries are not actually those beneficiaries. Is everyone linked to the NHIF, the older people, the ones who are benefiting? Are they fully and properly linked to the NHIF? And we need to go down to the ward level and to the constituency level and just do our good due diligence from a rights-based perspective. We need to advocate for the bills that are pending. One of the ones that I think for me are priority is the Mental Health Act, because of the mental health issues that go with aging, and the policy and the Senior Citizens Care and Protection Bill. I think we need to do a good survey with the National Bureau of Statistics to really appreciate the whole issue of aging in this country. As a National Commission, there's a bill that was being taken through by Senator Omar in the Senate. It's called the Preservation on Human Dignity and Enforcement of Economic and Social Rights. This is a bill that I think can also assist. It fell along the way after the session. It's something that we intend to reintroduce. From a public interest litigation perspective, we must go to court and litigate these issues. And which are some of the areas I think we need to litigate? In the health sector, for those who can afford health insurance, you have a waiting period from 1 year to 2 years to get a good health facility. Why should an old person wait for 2 years? We need to challenge that, because that's discriminatory. You can add your premiums maybe, but that is discriminatory. 2, there are also certain compulsory tests. Why should we have that? That's another discriminatory practice. Others including disclosing your HIV status, among other things. Then when you come to the issue of finance and credit, again, there's a challenge there, because it's discriminatory in terms of how you can access your credit and investment facility. You have to be employed, certain terms of employment, and also your age comes into question. I'm glad Judge is here, because for the judges and lecturers, they're in a special category, because at least we allow that until 75. Why? That's discriminatory. I'm being told my time is running out. Allow me to finish. We have the continuing adult education. I think that's a very good facility, but if you look at the numbers, they have not grown much from 2009 to 2012. I think not only should we teach older persons or adults to know how to read and write, we need to also use that program to prepare them for old age. We also need to help them gain the skills, what I would call some of the para-legal skills, for them to be able to insure themselves properly for old age. The last one is about the unclaimed financial assets. I think we need to look at that facility, because there's a lot of money. When it was set up in 2013? 2011, it had 10 billion unclaimed assets. 10 billion unclaimed assets. I don't know how much has been claimed, but when you think about unclaimed assets, it's about people who are in that category. This category we are talking about. So who is missing out in terms of the 10 billion? I think it's very, very important. We are going to have a census in 2019. I think we need to do some work with the Bureau of Statistics to ensure that some of the census questions help us have a very good demography of issues to deal with the aging population. Remember, as I said, the Panther: participation, accountability, non-discrimination, transparency, equality, and the rule of law. That is very, very important. And I also want to end with a short story of a lady called Priscilla Sitenei. Anyone who knows her? Priscilla Sitenei, we all know Maruge? Okay. Priscilla Sitenei, she also joined Standard 1, just like Maruge. And she joined Standard 1 in 2010. Priscilla Sitenei. She joined Standard 1 also in Eldoret, in Uasin Gishu, in Vision Preparatory in Dalat Village. Can we ask ourselves, why don't we know about Priscilla Sitenei? And yet we know about Maruge. Actually, Priscilla is the oldest primary school student. It's not Maruge anymore, because she joined when she was 90 years old. It's a great thing, but I am not smiling because she's not in the Guinness book. Why? Is it because she's a woman? We can't even remember Priscilla Sitene. And I had someone from Bomet, and the environs, Nandi. Anyway, that's Priscilla. Mahatma Gandhi said this: a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. What can we do for Priscilla Sitene? If we do that for her, we'll then be able to have a very good rights approach to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Lots of things to think about there, and I'm going to make sure that Priscilla is the person that I remember. Right, we now move on to Lydia Lugazia, who's from Kwawaze in Tanzania. Thank you very much for coming to join us. And she's going to talk about the Kwawaze organisation and their work in this area. Thank you. Again, here's what we're going to do here. Let's put this switch back again.
Yes.
It's here.
It's lunch ready.
No? Yeah.
I have got
And then to make it bigger. Okay. Good afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Habari ya mchana.
I'll put it to them.
Thank you, the organizer, for inviting Kwawaze to share our experience. I'm Lydia Lugazia from Kagera, working with the old people. Kwawaze started 2003 with only one component, but today we have three main components. The first one is old people, second one is children, and the third one is people living with HIV/AIDS. Today I'm going to concentrate with old people section. At Kwawaze we have 6 main activities which we deal with old people. First is pension funds, cash transfer for old people. Up to now we have 1,100. And then we have groups of old people where old people support each other. And also we have health programs. For health programs, old people, they do exercise and they train each other after they go back to the village to train the group members. Also we have self-protection for old people. Why we decided to start self-protection, there is a time where there was violence against old women. The organization decided to call the old people, old women, and discuss with them, and then we decided to start self-defense for old women. We have also advocates. Advocates, it helps the Kwawaze organization to fight for old people. The old people are just standing for themselves to fight for their lives. And last year, we decided to start cash transfer universal pension fund for old people. This is a pilot for 2 villages. Now we have almost 190 beneficiaries from 70 years plus. When we started 2003, Kwawaze was a model, but now we're asking ourselves, as you can see, in different countries in Africa, people are shifting, government are shifting from cash transfer to the pension funds. So we are in the transition period. We don't know exactly what will happen. Let me take you to the past work of Kwawaze. As I mentioned earlier, we started with only one component, and after 2008,
Kwazé decided to start formation of mutual supportive groups. This happened because there was an old woman who was sick, and then Kwazé staff members are the ones who are just going to take care of the family members, the children who were living with that old woman, and also to support her when she was admitted. So from that day is when we decided to discuss with the old people, and then they decided to form groups whereby these people supporting each other in difficult times or in hard times. And then there is the issue of self-defense. Also there is health programs, and then we have income generating activities. When they get pension, they decide to save in their groups and then to decide what they want to do with their money. Also we have advocates, which is very strong for fighting for their rights. Evaluation. 2008, we decided to evaluate our work. You can visit our website and then you can find the old documents. And then 2013, also we decided to conduct the survey. 185 participants, the old people participated. And then now, 2016, we conducted also the baseline survey in 2 villages for the pilot. When we looked into our evaluations, there was nothing new except to the psychosocial aspects. We decided to use 9 indicators for the children. In our evaluation, we used the control groups and project groups. So this is an example, and the following the chart of indicators which we used in our evaluation. As I said earlier, now you can see even in Kenya and the other countries, they are shifting to the pension, universal pension, and for example now in Zanzibar, old people are already benefited from the universal pension. What is the contribution from Kwazé? Our contribution, we have been working in the area, in the rural areas. We have been sharing our experience with other stakeholders, like the government. We have been invited into the parliament to share our work with the government and the other stakeholders. And then also we have been trying to share our work. As you saw in the beginning that we had different evaluations. So the results we have been sharing with other people, and then people have been using into their different work. If you look around, and the other presenters mentioned that most of old people are getting problems. People are just are experiencing violence. Once in our area, there was a time whereby a group of young people were just entering different houses of old people, just abusing them. So, Kwazé, if other organizations or other government will introduce the cash transfer or pension, Kwazé will continue with self-defense, because I think, as you know, that many people, old people, they need to get support and they are weak. It's difficult for them to defend. To conclude, cash transfer is efficient, it's cost effective, and it's easy to reach many people. The following are pictures of self-defense of our old people when they are just practicing self-defense. And then these are old people addressing their issues to the DMO. And then we have Earth program, where people are just writing and then attending the eye clinic. And then that one is our DC, when he was launching our UPP. Asante.
Thank you very much. And may I ask now Joyce Wanjiku to come and do her presentation. She's from Purity Elderly Care Foundation and is going to talk about dignity to the old. We've heard a lot about dignity, but let's hear from Joyce on the issue of dignity.
Good afternoon. I hope you can see me. Yes, I think so. Now, much has been said about the issues affecting the elderly. Our chair here talked about all the problems, and I've had so many people talk about them. So I'm not going to talk about the issues affecting the elderly. That has been said already. I will be talking about Purity Elderly Care Foundation, the work we've done, real issues, real people, real challenges. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I'll skip some slides, and there is a short video, a clip from one of the TV stations that you'll watch. This is me giving compassion. These are the people we deal with, real people, real issues, real challenges, real things happening in the society where I am in at. So I'm not going to talk about any technical language like Dr. Performan did. So I'm just going to be simple, clear for you to understand what we do. And first I wish to thank the chair through the National Agenda for partnering with us over the years. And Professor, we really appreciate this invitation. We are actually happy that we're going to tell the world through this forum what real issues are in Kenya.
We have found so many cases of neglect, abandonment, loneliness. Even however rich you are, you find you're at the age of 90-something and you're lonely because your kids are busy. It is not easy. It is a calling for me. It is a calling that no one understands. I came back. People thought I came back because I was deported. Others said I was fired.
It is a calling that takes knocking on as many doors to find the one door that will open. When it does, like on this day, it is a lifeline for some of the elderly in Nyeri County forced to lead lonely lives in their sunset years with no one to fend for them except Joyce Wanjiku.
We rely heavily on well wishes. I am known as a professional beggar. I walk around begging, beg for food, I beg for blankets, and supporting it's you and me so that it can help these people to live a dignified life.
We are doing this work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we are not able to reach everywhere.
What we do as Purity Elderly Care Foundation is that we don't only feed them, we also have others who have dilapidated houses, shelters. We built for them. We have built quite a number of them right now, as it were, and we are very proud of the work that is done out there, that we have done out there.
Mary Wairimu understands all too well what it means to have a roof over her head. For years, Haz could not hold, but abandoned, she suffered in silence through the punishing situation.
Wanjiku alikuja napata nyumba yangu na pomoka na bua ikinyesha tunafunga makonia na maratasi. Akakuja akaona mimi kuna tabu mingi sana, akasaidia mimi, akajenga nyumba, akapatia kitu ya kuweka kwa maji. Sasa mimi naona, mimi nasema Wanjiku Mungu amsaidie.
For Joyce Wanjiku, taking care of the elderly is a personal conviction born out of a personal experience.
Purity is the name of my late mother, whom I believe I should have done more to actually, let her demise or move to be with the Lord with dignity. I was not there for her, and hence I started Purity Foundation.
Shinda yangu nilikuwa nakuisha damu. Damu kukuisha ndio Wanjiku alikuja. Kasikia mimi mgonjwa sana. Kanipeleka hospitali. Kunipeleka nikakaa mwezi mzima. nikaongezwa damu. Sasa mimi mzuri sana.
The testimonies make it worth the while for a woman whose sacrifice meant that she had to leave a budding career in South Africa to return home to care for them, a move no one could comprehend.
I went back to my employer and I was like, you send me to a shrink? They think I'm no more. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going back to Kenya where I'm going to take care of the elderly. Everybody thought I was crazy. Packed my bags, came to Kenya and registered Purity Elderly Care Foundation, an organization that takes care of now the vulnerable elderly. People who you have neglected, abandoned, who you have forgotten.
She compliments efforts by the government to support the elderly through the cash transfer program for older people as well as orphaned and vulnerable children. It is a program she lauds, but she is also of the opinion that more can be done to improve its effectiveness.
The institutions responsible for handling these cash transfer programs, I'm actually begging that kindly can we do it in a dignified way. We find elderly people outside the post office, Moinyeri, where I come from, they struggle. There's like hundreds of them. They have no seats, they have no water, they have no sanitation even.
Her hope is that the growing population of the country will have someone to look after them.
I'm asking guys, don't throw your old people away. They're nice people. You're going to get old too. Don't throw them away. Look after your old people. Let it be your responsibility. Remember, you're going to get old too.
Leaving no one behind by creating a society for all is a calling Joyce Wanjiku Cairo is keen to keep alive. Salim Bilu, Citizen Weekend.
I think I can sit now. Now, Purity is the name of my late mother. I started the organization after my mother passed away to cancel the colon. I was not there for her. I was busy gallivanting all over the world, like most of us do. Most of us are busy doing things, traveling all over the world. Your parents get sick and all you do is call M-Pesa. They don't need M-Pesa. They need your touch. I was not there for Purity, and hence I started Purity Elderly Care Foundation, which is what an organization I recommend that we do home-based care like you do with your dad and like you do with your father. So that is what it is, home-based care. You go to the homes, you watch them, you take care of them, you love them, you just give them compassion. You don't want to be thrown away. We serve over 400 people, but only when those people that we touch lives on a monthly basis. But where we do have occasional events where we bring in thousands of people. You've seen them dancing. We bring them together. We dance. We party. You've seen the events, and we are in Nyeri County. That's where we started, and we would like to expand more. I've gone to Kirinyaga. I've been to Kisii, where Nyamanche. Then we work with the local administration chiefs, we work with the county, they give us relief food, they help us with intervention, and like-minded partners would like to spread over the country, to touch lives, to touch these old people, to touch you when you age, because you're getting there. These are the issues I think the chair has spoken about, and most of them she has expounded on all that, so I'm not going to expound on the challenges affecting the elderly. But I'm going to expound on one, motorbike accidents. That is killing a lot of people, leaving orphans. The elderly are left with the orphans because of motorbike. It's actually not, it's worse than AIDS, HIV. So I think we need to take note to that, yes. Myths. This is a Beatrice. They are annoying, irritating, and a burden. Do you know you call your old people mzigo? A burden. I've been left this burden to take care of. They are not. They are human beings. You're getting there. All people are like children. How can they be like children? If they've been born, they have had teeth. How can they go back to be children? Losing one teeth, like Desmond Tutu say, does not make you a child. So I think they're more older women than men. So what do you do with the men when they age? This room has more men than women today. So do we say old men die quickly? Probably. Ask yourselves why. I don't know. Poverty. Witchcraft, like you mentioned, we have it in Kilifi, we have it all, like in Kisii, because no woman or no man has clutter in the house. You unclutter the house or you assume it's a witch. And that person is just clearly accumulating what they have because you're not actually helping them clean the homes. Elderly must be inherited. Seriously? Can you get your own stuff? And for your own living. Stop waiting to inherit what your father and get your own. That is my point. I should not be waiting. I know you've seen a building, it is my father's building that you saw on TV. He gave it to me for 3 years. Then I told him, Dad, thank you very much. I can now go and get myself a room to work from. I do not want to inherit until he decides to give me. So stop waiting to inherit your parents' wealth. Work for yours. The elderly smell, they stink. Someone told me that last week. They stink. They smell. If that's what you think, you'll smell too. Aging is a disease. You know, I was on Churchill a month ago, and after the show, I got some phone calls from nurses. I'm looking for a job. What job? A nurse. Who told you aging is a disease? That I'm taking care of sick people. I'm taking care of people who have been neglected, abandoned. It is not a hospital you're running. Aging, but it comes with the diseases. It will come with diabetes, it will come with age-related diseases, it will come with different diseases, but it isn't a disease. So do not see an old person and think they are sick because they have arthritis. A home for the aged, it is not African. But we can do a nursing home, a palliative care nursing home, where one will come towards their last days, where you see they're too bad, because our hospitals in Kenya, they're too cold for the elderly. For instance, we have lost 7 of them in the last the cold season because of cold and pneumonia. So we can do a home, not a nursing home, but not an old people's home. Let's not throw people away. They are nice people. You're getting there. What do? We give compassion. That's the first thing. We give love to the rich, poor, name them. We just give compassion, and that's why we bring them together during international days. We educate the community on aging issues. We clean and repair houses. We encourage, we assist the sick to access medical care. And I am known to take the sick to hospital, and I don't pay. So I'll go cry there, scream, then they're released before the media comes. So I lobby and advocate for their rights. For instance, I lobbied within the Nyeri Law Courts, where we took, I went to see how they do these succession cases or the inheritance cases. And an old woman was taken to the 3rd floor of the building with a mattress because there was no elevator. I went back to the judiciary, wrote to them, they came back to me, and today we are proud that Nyeri Law Courts have elevators. We sensitize them through the mainstream media and social media. That I'm quite vocal, and for the sake of you in old age. Our journey, we have done quite a bit, and we still would want to do more. And I'm sure you can see some of the things that we have done. We have sensitized many. We have put up 38 houses in 3 years. We have set up an office already, thanks to supporters who pay for the office, people who volunteer and pay directly to the landlord for rental. We have, in 3 years, 7 years, there's still more that we have done government intervention, where we have persisted on older cash transfer programs, a National Hospital Insurance Fund through the county government. Now we talked about the elevators. And there's so much that we have done, and we have started an income generating project. You can't carry plastic bags anymore, isn't it? Can you help us help people, the elderly, with material to make those chondos for you to buy and carry them instead of plastic bags? We need that help. Future, we're still going to do intensive lobbying. We want to train more caregivers. We want to educate people on retirement and aging to tell them it comes with so many things. In fact, we are doing that right now. We are reminding us that we are getting old. So we need to educate, we need to know what it comes with. We want to reach 47 counties within the next 10 years with your help. There is a program we call, or a model that we call Adopt a Granny model. Adopt a Granny is that you adopt one of our grannies and you support that granny either directly by paying a shop, not her or he. You pay to a supermarket or a shop. The person will go there, collect food for worth so much, and cash to sustain that person, and especially those who are not able to go and collect the cash transfer. Oh, yes. We would like to have a motto. We walk a lot, and we have had motorbike accidents like they have done. I have 2 injuries here, and I've hidden a bit of makeup. That's motorbike accident. So there is, we do so much, but we still need to do more with your support, and thanks to those partners who have come aboard. Some of the urgent or immediate things that we need is usually food. This cold season, we collect blankets. Every day we would want to collect walking aids or supporting aids. We collect adult diapers because they need them. There are those who need them. That is where aging, disease comes in, but not aging. It is issues. Even a 17-year-old person with a diaper, isn't it? Yeah. So we collect firewood. We collect matchboxes. It is a luxury. If you take a matchbox to an old person, it is held like money. They hide it. They put it in their head. Put it inside there. And firewood, it's critical. Then with construction materials, and we partner on international events like International Day for Older Persons. We have one coming up, Carol, on the 3rd of October. And we are holding a very huge event. We have involved the county government. We shall be meeting the First Lady of Nyeri County to organize the event. We'd like to hold it to make the world feel the elderly, to make them know that they need to be celebrated, and we celebrate in a big way. I may be small, but for the elderly, I'll do anything. Now, our core challenges, we do have challenges. We were building houses before, but now, because of families, I don't know who said that their families wait for you build, then they come and take the house, wait for you to die. That is what now we decided to repair homes. I'll go into quick. Some of our core challenges include finances. Ridicule, people think I'm mad, they think I'm crazy, they think I'm wasting time, they think going into glass to an old woman like that is no more. We get sick. I had jiggers the other day. This year and last year I contracted jiggers. Last year, because of the work that we do, I contracted tuberculosis, TB. Okay, I'm recovered, don't worry. I took drugs from September 19 to March this year. And then we have negativity, lack of commitment from volunteers. That is me carrying blankets to take to old people and food. Some of our partners include the National Agenda and my dad, and so many other people have come on board to support us, including friends and family. Now, this one, just allow me 2 minutes. We also party, just look at that. We went to the showground with the old people, we had balloons, then bread, soda, and we do really have fun. That is housing issue, and we repaired, we built a new one to that one. And that's the extreme makeover. You see what you see on TV? We still do that. I see that. I also do marriage counseling. If you have issues, you can see me later. This couple they were moved to Solio by the government. The husband left the woman in the village, where I found her with jiggers and so badly sick. I went and put up this structure and brought them together. They're happily now married. Yeah. This is stigma. This man was stigmatized because he was a bad man. I went and decided I was not going to stigmatize him. I was going to give him a new lease of life, took him to hospital, brought him back, and he found a new house I had built for him. Did we talk about abuse? Yeah. And rape. This is a 95-year-old, no, 98 now. At 96, she was raped. Yes. But she's still alive. She lives with her 8 orphans. Now they've gone to school. And in her room, I've done some repairs in her room and put some, double deckers. So we just now give her compassion and, feed her once in a while when we can. But she has family that comes quite often. But unfortunately, the man was killed. He was beaten by people.
Finally?
This is abuse as well. This is at 7 in the morning. I walk in there. This woman is supposed to be the caregiver. And she has neglected that woman. 7 in the morning, July, and she's wearing a sweater. She's not wearing a sweater. I have given her diapers and she has not put up properly. This is real. That's another case. Trizia, she had maggots on her body all over. We took her, we cleaned her, we gave her some paracetamols, and she died 16 later after my intervention. Prison, we talked about prison. We do prison visits where we take bread, compassion, blue band, tissue, paper or toilet rolls, soap, such things.
Finally?
Yeah, that's the house. Yes. A family. Yes, those are. A woman sleeps here with her sheep. Now, I went and put this out. She said she could not sleep outside. I mean, without her sheep. So I went and divided the house, put a new structure. The sheep sleep there. She has 6 of them now, and she sleeps on this side. And tell me she's not going to get sick. That's a naughty woman. Now, I think I need to move some photos. Those are international days that we observe. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day 2017. That's our elderly people walking with me in town. That's where people think I'm crazy. Yes. We groom them. We have medical camps, we cut their hair. There we go. Medical camps. Drugs, boy, I'm a professional beggar. I go to even supermarkets and pharmaceuticals to ask for drugs. That's me begging the governor to feed the old people and to give them money at a national event. May his soul rest in peace. Imagine they ate at Outspan Hotel. I took them there and told them, you're going to actually dine with the High Mighty. Just need to finish. That's Commissioner Dubai dancing with the elderly at one of the international days. There we go. We party anyway. We have fun and they eat real food. They cut cake. That's transport. We don't have one with volunteers. But I would like to age. And I'll tell you why. That's food stuff donated. Blankets donated.
Joyce, we're going to have to stop you.
Yes. Okay, let me tell you. You'll stop me. I don't want to age because I can laugh, cough, sneeze, and pee all at the same time.
Thank you very much, Joyce. A good note to end on, I think. And particularly showing us some real-life examples of what we're discussing here today. Now, we face a problem, folks, don't we? It's 25 past 1, and we have lunch. Yes, Jenny.
I've come up with a solution.
Oh, Jenny's come up with a solution. Good.
So what's going to happen is, in the next half an hour, we're going to break into our group discussions to talk about elderly rights and what we can do from our different stakeholder groups, what we can do to support and improve them. So what we're going to do now, then at 2 o'clock we'll have dinner and the program will just be pushed a little bit later, but it will be fine.
Good.
So what I've put up here is there's 4 discussion groups. I've broken you kind of into key stakeholder groups. So the group 1 is universities, the commissions, ministries, so kind of, and then group 2, the NGOs, some NGOs and chiefs, especially the NGOs that are operating out in Kisumu and Western Province that are looking at alternative dispute resolution. And then in group 3, we have the judicial and legal professionals, trade union and some NGOs. And then in group 4, international NGOs and research centers. So obviously there's some overlap between these groups, but this seems like one way to go about it. If your name is not on the list and you joined us this morning for the sessions, but you didn't register for the workshop, you are welcome to stay for the discussion. Please just find what stakeholder group you identify with. If you are a legal professional, if you are working for an NGO, university, etc., just join that group. So what we'll do is we'll have group 1 here, group 2, and then in the back, group 3, and in the back here, group 4. I have a piece of paper for each group to write down kind of key points.
2 points?
Yeah, 2 points of kind of key measures that could be taken to support elderly rights.
Is that clear? Can everybody read? I mean, we're forcing you into groups here. Is that acceptable to you? Yeah? So we will feed you at 2 o'clock, but it seems a shame not to be able to discuss a little bit about the issues. So the idea for this morning is we've got time to talk about other issues later on, but if we concentrate this morning out of the points that everybody has made, what more do we need to do if we concentrate on elderly rights? Do we need elder law? How do we make everybody aware of the issues that we have all been made aware of or know already? What do we need to do? Do we need to put it into education? Do we need to put it into, for instance, the academic lawyers or the lawyers? Do we need to train people on understanding the rights of law? Do we need a book on elder law if we're doing it in the academic context? Do we need easy guides to understanding the constitutional rights? I don't know. Dispute resolution. How do we go to resolve disputes? Where do we go? How do we make it easy to do that? Do we need guidelines on how to relate to the elderly with dignity and so on? What are those questions about? What would make the rights of the elderly meaningful for various areas of activity that we've looked at this morning? So we've in a sense put you into various groups, and we hope you don't mind being put into those groups. And then if you've just got 2 points that you think, how would we make the rights of the elderly meaningful in a practical way? And if you write down 2 points, we can share them at the beginning after lunch this afternoon. Is that an acceptable way of proceeding? Yeah? Go for it.